Hello everyone, this is Jason Petrozello from Avault, and I thought I would take some time to do a video review of Magicka. I want to take players through some of the basics of how magic works in this game to demonstrate the flexibility of the system. Now for this first part of the demonstration, I've set my character up so that he is next to an NPC named Vlad, who will register damage done to him, but who won't die, so I can cast all kinds of obliterating spells at him and not worry about killing him. Now the basis of all magic in this game is that you as the player will queue up various magical effects and elements and then cast them at a target like I just did with lightning. The more of each element you cast in a spell, the more damage it does in particular. And you can combine elements with different kinds of effects. So for example, I can combine steam and lightning to do extra damage to a target, or I can set a target on fire with both lightning and fire at the same time. Different elements also are cast in different ways. For example, Arcane creates a beam that does a lot of damage to a single target. You can see by the incrementing damage that I'm doing much more damage to Vlad with that Arcane spell than I am with the lightning earlier. You can also use healing spells in the same way. So I just healed Vlad for a whole bunch of health, which is useful in multiplayer. You may also cast shields, as I indicate, but things get really interesting when you start mixing and matching different spell effects. For example, let's say I want to create a shield of volcanic mountains between me and a target. I can cast a spell like that. By combining the elements of fire, earth, and shield, I can protect myself with this sort of impenetrable wall of volcanoes that seriously damage anyone who even tries to penetrate through them. And since it's solid stone as well, they have to physically try and breach the defenses of it while setting themselves on fire. As you can see, Vlad is still immolated by flames even after the spell has expired. I'm going to douse his flames with a water spell to sort of get him back to zero. But spells often combine in strange ways. If I combine Arcane with Shield, I produce a kind of landmine like you see now on the screen. It's explosive and it does a lot of damage to me. As you might expect, the ability to mine an area is very useful, although of course friendly fire, as always, applies to every spell in the game. And it's not limited to dangerous spell effects too. I can create healing landmines, which seems rather oxymoronic, but there you go. I can leave them in a path of retreat, run away from monsters, and hit my healing landmines and receive health. Some really exotic combinations of elements create really bizarre effects, like this electrical ice I just conjured up. And noticed how as I cast spells and conjure elements up, I have a little Q underneath my character that indicates what I currently have. That particular spell I just cast created an electrical field that also slowed me down with frost, which made it very difficult to heal myself. It would have been much more dangerous against my enemies had I any enemies on the field at the moment. Certain spells like this fireball I'm about to cast can be charged by holding down the casting button for an extended period of time so that they do even more damage. And the same elements can even be cast in different ways. I'm going to cast this ice spell in area effect around me first, and then I'm going to cast it as an offensive spell against a single target. See, casting it in different ways produced very different results, even with the same elements. If it's raw damage you're looking for against a single target, you really can't go wrong by conjuring up some steam, lightning, and arcane for a nasty beam attack. The steam makes the target wet, the lightning does extra damage to a wet target, and the arcane element turns it into a solid beam that attacks a target. As you can see, I did over 30,000 points of damage to Vlad. I'm going to make him not wet anymore by setting him on fire briefly, and then I'm going to cast a different spell. Now, instead of using steam this time, I'm going to combine lightning, fire, and arcane to produce an energy beam that sets the target on fire in addition to the damage it normally does. This produces a somewhat different effect, and depending on the kind of enemy I'm facing, it might dictate which spell combination I use. For maximum fun against lumbering huge targets, I can cast also a frost version of the same spell using frost, lightning, and arcane to produce an energy beam that slows and freezes the target even as the target takes massive damage. As with all spells, it's always situational based on the environment you're fighting in and the targets that you're engaging. I could even go one up from Emperor Palpatine and use Force Lightning that'll set people on fire. If Luke Skywalker had been hit with that attack, he wouldn't have made it out of Return of the Jedi, I guarantee it. And now for maximum fun, I'm going to conjure up a wall of stone that also acts as mines. I'm going to try and bust through it with my own weapon to illustrate how, there you go, see how dangerous that is? Not only did I damage myself, but I set myself on fire. Had I been using that against enemies, they would certainly have paid a price for trying to breach through my defensive wall. But enough about magical theory and controlling the game. Let's take a look at some actual combat. I've set up a challenge mode where I'll be facing swarm after swarm of enemies, and I'm going to show you how flexible the magic of the game is against a variety of opponents that have various abilities. Keep in mind as I play this, I will also be picking up swords and staves that will grant me additional abilities, and I'll highlight them as we go through the battle. As you listen, also pay attention to the sounds. You'll hear some of the humorous aspects of the game as you listen to the goblins taunt me, or to the druids yelling shrubbery. Notice that targets that are set on fire will tend to flee around on the map in terror because they're burning to death, which adds a useful element to that particular kind of spellcasting. Terry Pratchett fans will have noticed that there are sapient pearwood boxes that carry various items for you in the challenge mode. They're not quite as dangerous as the luggage itself, but it is a nice touch anyway. I'm going to pick up that spear there and display what its abilities are. Various melee weapons and staves in the game have very different kinds of abilities. Some of them are more useful than others. Those goblins with the big bags on their shoulders are carrying bombs. And I will be using various spells to try and counteract that, including a sort of pushing telekinetic spell. You'll also notice that there's an enemy spellcaster who just fried some of his allies. As always, friendly fire is in full effect at all times by both yourself and your enemies. Now I'm going to pick up the Rod of Emergency Teleport, which is a staff that'll let me teleport around the screen. So occasionally you're going to see me teleport wildly all over the screen. That's a part of what that magic item does. It's a way of getting out of danger, although you cannot control where you land. Now these books I'm picking up contain special spells called Magics, which have specialized effects. You cast them using certain recipes and then pressing the spacebar rather than using standard mouse control. They provide effects from everything from charm to haste to even summoning the undead. I'm still not very good at using them, even at this point after I'm done reviewing the game. They take some practice getting used to, believe me. Now I'm about to start facing some trolls. I'm going to throw up a volcanic wall to block one, and now I'm going to use a frost lightning beam on the trolls. You'll notice that while I'm hitting them with the beam, they can't really do very much. It's more important, in my view, to stop the trolls in their tracks and slowly kill them than it is to try and kill them with maximum DPS. Now, I spend a lot of time using lightning and fire effects against these swarms of goblins because it's very effective against them. But when the druids come in the next wave of attack, you're going to see that this option is suddenly going to be not nearly as effective. Now, if you pay attention, you'll see that another enemy spellcaster is in this particular wave. You have to look closely, but you can see that when the enemy spellcaster casts magic spells, you can see his elements as well. Smart players can use that to their advantage to see what kinds of stuff the enemy is going to cast and try and beat them to the punch. Because I keep setting everybody on fire with lightning, it makes me difficult to see, but pay attention and you'll see that he's casting certain kinds of spells. Now you'll see the recipe for the Raise Dead magic spell underneath my element queue, but I keep screwing the spell up as I'm trying to cast it, and I almost kill myself right here casting a spell that affects both me and my enemies. I'm going to try to cast this spell again in just a second, and I'm going to screw it up 2 or 3 more times before I'm finally successful. I'm just going to tell you, I'm not going to survive this particular wave of attacks, and the druids that I'm now facing have opened with a rainstorm, which makes it basically suicide to try and use lightning effects. You can't even cast lightning while you're wet because you just end up shocking yourself to death. But it also douses flames, so even if I wanted to set these targets on fire, I can't because they keep getting soaked with water. Now, if I were smarter, I would probably be trying to use frost and ice-based attacks, given the fact that the druids keep casting rainstorm on the whole map. But I don't do that because I'm being an idiot right now, and I keep trying to use fire-based attacks to kill the trees. While they are vulnerable to fire, given the environmental considerations and given the spells that the druids are casting, it's a bad strategy that I'm using, and I'm going to pay the price for it. The good news here is I'll finally be able to cast Raise Dead and summon some undead creatures to fight for me at this point in the battle. However, it's too late for me. I'm not going to do well. Now I'm about to do something very stupid. I'm going to use fire to stop myself from being soaking wet, and I'm going to start conjuring lightning elements. I just got killed because they cast a water spell on me while I had lightning elements activated, and so I just did about 1,000 points of damage to myself. And that's going to wrap it up for me for the moment. Thank you for taking the time to look at this video. Please go to Adrenaline Vault and check out the rest of the review, and I look forward to seeing you there.